The acrid stench of vaporized blood and scorched metal hung thick in the arena's recycled air. Forlag the Unbroken, a titan sheathed in scarred, gunmetal gray battleplate, stood amidst the carnage. His latest challenger, a hulking reptilian mercenary famed on 3 systems, was now little more than a smoldering ruin at his feet, reduced by a single contemptuous blast from Forlag's integrated plasma cannon. The crowd's roar was a distant, meaningless thunder, a sound he absorbed like radiation, fueling the cold furnace of his rage. He crushed the mercenary's shattered skull underfoot with a crunch that silenced the stands. Weakness. Always weakness. He scanned the cowering spectators, his enhanced optics painting them in hues of fear and awe. They saw only the engine of destruction, the supreme champion, the Emperor's unstoppable fist. He saw confirmation. Strength was power, power was victory, and victory demanded annihilation. Anything less was death. Aboard the Imperial dreadnought Iron Fist, Commander Trell projected tactical holos onto the obsidian briefing table. Forlag loomed over them, his massive frame radiating impatience, the ozone scent of his armor systems faintly perceptible. Earth, Trell stated, her voice clipped, devoid of the awe others showed. A blue-green sphere spun. Designation, Sol 3. Technologically primitive, factionalized, yet stubborn. Their primary resistance employs crude kinetics and guerrilla tactics within these dense biozones. She highlighted a swathe of deep green on the northwestern continent, ancient, dripping forests. Sensor ghosts plague scans. Minimal energy signatures. Likely a command node. Forlag's internal processors word. Trees. Mud. Organics hiding like insect. A cleansing operation. He rumbled, the bass vibration humming in the deck plates. A demonstration. Trell met his glowing ocular lenses. Their tactics are unconventional, deceptive. They exploit terrain, avoid direct engagement. Efficiency reports indicate disproportionate resource expenditure per target neutralized. Forlag snorted, a sound like grinding rocks. Deception is the refuge of the feeble. Unconventional tactics shatter against overwhelming force. This, he gestured towards the hollow forest with a gauntlet fist the size of a bulkhead hatch, is nothing. He craved the simplicity of obliteration, the binary clarity of his plasma cannon reducing complexity to ash. Primitive organics offered no worthy challenge, only target practice. Duty called, he would answer with fire. Forlag's drop pod screamed through Earth's atmosphere, a meteor of imperial wrath. It impacted the rainforest floor with cataclysmic force, flattening ancient ferns, shattering centuries-old tree trunks into splintered ruin. Soil and debris geysered upwards. The pod's hatch blew off and Forlag emerged, a monolith of death stepping onto alien soil. Imperial troopers deployed nearby, their sleek, standardized armor jarring against the primal greens and browns, setting up perimeter scanners that chirped and whined. The sensory assault was immediate and discordant. The sterile, filtered air of the Iron Fist was replaced by a humid, fecund miasma, damp earth, rotting vegetation, alien pollens, the musky scent of unseen fauna. The silence of space gave way to a cacophony. The incessant drone of insects, the rustle of creatures in the undergrowth, the sigh of wind through countless leaves, the distant rush of water. His advanced sensors, calibrated for ship corridors and battlefields, flickered and struggled. Thermal imaging blurred with ambient heat and decaying matter. Motion trackers flitted with false positives from wind-stirred branches and falling debris. Audio filters strained to separate threat from the forest's organic symphony. It felt chaotic, uncontrolled, weak. A trooper's shout cut through the din, abruptly silenced by a sickening thud. Then another cry, cut short. Forlag whirled, his targeting systems painting the dense foliage. Contact! Visual! A trooper yelled, voice tight with fear. Movement! Sector Gamma! Gone! Blaster fire erupted, searing bright bolts into the gloom, vaporizing leaves and scarring bark. A trooper stumbled into a concealed pit lined with sharpened stakes. Another triggered a snare, yanked screaming into the canopy. Not dead, but panicked, wounded, ineffective. The attackers remained phantoms, striking from impossible angles with near-silent projectiles, a blur of spinning metal. A shuriken? A sharpened stick propelled by breath. Cowardice. Hiding in the green shadows. Rage, his oldest companion, surged hot and pure. Face me! Foreleg bellowed, the sonic force of his voice shattering nearby branches, sending showers of leaves pattering down. He triggered his armor's concussion emitters. A visible wave of force rippled outwards, flattening ferns, cracking smaller trees. He wanted to burn the hiding places away. He wanted the enemy to stand. High in the canopy, impossibly still against a moss-draped branch, a shadow detached itself. Not a heat signature, not a clear outline, just a deeper darkness that flowed against the pattern of leaves. Forelag's targeting reticule snapped onto it. Lock. A surge of predatory triumph. Plasma cannon capacitors whined, gathering devastating energy. He fired. A searing white lance incinerated the branch, vaporizing wood and moss in a microsecond fireball, showering the forest floor with glowing embers. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by the crackle of dying flames and the terrified breathing of the troopers. The shadow was gone. Vanished. No thermal bloom of escape, no sonic footprint of movement. Nothing. Had he imagined it? Frustration warred with cold assessment. Then, a vibration. Not an impact, but a precise thunk, felt more than heard, resonating through the dense armor plating near his left shoulder joint. He looked down. Embedded in the scarred gunmetal gray, perfectly balanced, its edges gleaming faintly in the dappled light filtering through the shattered canopy, was a small, multi-pointed metal star. A shuriken. It hadn't penetrated the armor, not even scratched the primary adamantine layer. It was a mark. A signature. A silent, impossible challenge delivered from point-blank range. Forelag the Unbroken froze. Absolute stillness gripped the Titan. No sensor warning. No proximity alert. No sound of approach or retreat. Just the forest breathing around him, the terrified gasps of his men, and the cold, undeniable reality of the star-shaped metal lodged in the symbol of his invincibility. The Unbroken had been touched. Rage detonated within Forelag. The shuriken wasn't damage, it was desecration. A guttural roar ripped from his vocal synthesizer, shaking the very air. His plasma cannon, already primed, vomited incandescent fury. A searing white beam carved a molten trench through the forest, vaporizing ancient ferns, igniting massive cedars into roaring pyres. The concussion emitters pulsed again, shattering trunks into lethal shrapnel that rained down. He became a walking cataclysm, a whirlwind of monomolecular blades slicing through thickets like paper, each swing powered by cybernetic fury. "Coward! Show yourself!" he bellowed, turning the verdant sanctuary into a smoldering wasteland. But the shadow remained elusive. His sensors screamed betrayal. A thermal bloom flared, a decoy of heated rocks hidden beneath damp moss. Motion trackers locked onto fluttering leaves stirred by his own sonic blast. His plasma blast aimed at a rustle high in the canopy vaporized only a bundle of leaves artfully arranged on a branch. He charged a flicker of darkness, his massive fist connecting with a decaying log rigged to collapse, burying him momentarily in a cascade of rotten wood and startled insects. Mud, flung from a disturbed puddle by a near-invisible tripwire, smeared his visor. Water from a shattered stream conduit hissed against his armor joints, causing minor short-circuit flickers. Each encounter was a humiliation, not injury, but a masterful demonstration of his impotence against an enemy who refused to be fought on his terms. Exhaustion, alien and unwelcome, began to seep into Forelag's consciousness. Not physical fatigue, his enhancements negated that, but a profound mental and spiritual drain. His rage, usually an inexhaustible fuel, burned itself out against the forest's silent resilience, and the phantom foe. The constant roar of his weapons, the shriek of stressed metal, the crackle of fire, it all suddenly felt grotesquely loud, wasteful. He stood panting, a colossus amidst self-inflicted ruin, the stench of ozone and burning wood thick in his helmet. "Why won't you stand?" The thought, unbidden, cut through the fury. What is this? Driven by instinct deeper than combat protocols, Forelag silenced his external comms. He powered down his thermal imaging, his motion trackers, his predictive targeting suite. The constant barrage of data, the lies his sensors told, ceased. The world plunged into relative quiet, filtered only through his helmet's basic audio pickups and the narrow view of his optical lenses. The forest sounds rushed back. The drip of water on scorched leaves, the wind sighing through surviving branches, the distant cry of a bird. He listened, he looked, and he began to see. Not with sensors, but with a hyper-focused awareness born of desperation. A fern frond, bent unnaturally downwards near its base. A ripple on the surface of a small, still pool, concentric circles expanding from no visible cause. A patch of shadow against the moss-covered flank of a giant sequoia that seemed denser. Then, movement. Not a charge, but a fluid flow, a dark shape detaching from the larger shadow, flowing around the periphery of his destructive path, using the smoldering craters and fallen trees as cover, always maintaining distance. It was like watching water avoid a rock, effortlessly, conserving energy, positioning itself with impossible economy. This wasn't evasion, it was a different language of combat. Efficiency, patience, the environment itself wielded as a shield and a weapon. A philosophy etched in movement. Winning without fighting. Forelag's targeting reticule automatically painted the figure, now visible perhaps 30 meters away, leaning calmly against the massive sequoia. His finger hovered over the plasma cannon trigger. The rage was gone, replaced by a chilling, hollow comprehension. This figure hadn't tried to kill him. It likely couldn't, not through his armor with primitive weapons. The shuriken, the traps, the evasion, it was all a demonstration. A brutal, elegant lesson in the futility of everything Forelag represented. With a sound like a mountain settling, Forelag lowered his arms. The whine of the plasma cannon capacitors died. He deliberately disengaged the magnetic locks holding his primary weapons. The massive plasma cannon and the monomolecular blade gauntlet fell from his forearms, thudding heavily onto the churned, scorched earth. He stood, unarmed, a mountain of scarred metal and fading aggression. The figure, the ninja, Kage, remained still near the sequoia. No triumphant pose, no hidden weapon drawn. Just an unnerving calm, an absolute focus. His dark eyes, visible now in the dappled light filtering through the broken canopy, held no fear. Only observation. And something else, a profound, unsettling pity? Then Kage moved his hands. Slowly, deliberately, his fingers formed intricate shapes, not gestures of threat, but of intense concentration and ancient ritual Kujikiri seals. Each movement was precise, controlled, radiating a palpable sense of inner discipline, a mastery turned entirely inward. It spoke of decades honing not the body to destroy, but the spirit to endure and understand. It was power, undeniable, but power of a kind Forelag had never imagined, existing entirely apart from violence. The final seal held. Silence stretched, thick with unspoken meaning. The crack in Forelag's identity, the unbroken, the destroyer, widened into a chasm. The rage that had fueled him for decades flickered out completely, leaving only a vast, echoing void. The question rose, not from his tactical computer, but from the newly discovered depths of his own being, shattering the last vestige of the champion he had been. What am I without the fight? The void stared back, offering only the ninja's silent, devastating answer. A life defined solely by destruction was no life at all. Forelag remained frozen, weaponless, staring at the embodiment of an impossible truth, his entire world reduced to ashes and the terrifying prospect of silence. The silence after Kage vanished was thicker than the forest mist, broken only by the crackle of dying fires Forlag had ignited and the ragged breathing of terrified troopers. Commander Trell arrived moments later, her sleek armor smeared with mud, her usually controlled face a mask of furious disbelief. She took in the scene. The smoldering devastation, the disoriented troopers, Forlag standing motionless and weaponless, the Imperial war machine's primary armaments lying discarded in the churned earth like forgotten toys. Forlag! Trell's voice cut through the unnatural quiet, sharp with command. Report. Status of the target? Why are your weapons disengaged? Resume offensive operations immediately. Neutralize the primitive threat. Forlag didn't turn. His massive frame remained oriented towards the ancient sequoia where Kage had stood, his glowing ocular lenses dimmed. The ozone scent of his systems was fading, replaced by the damp earth and burnt wood. The fight, he rumbled, his voice a low vibration devoid of its former thunder, stripped bare, is over. Over. Trell sputtered, stepping closer, gesturing wildly at the surrounding forest shadows. The enemy is still out there, hiding, employing cowardly tactics. Your duty, champion, is to crush this resistance. Activate your systems. Retrieve your arms. Slowly, deliberately, Forlag raised one massive, gauntlet hand. Not in aggression, but in negation. He pressed a sequence on his forearm console. The low, omnipresent hum of his gravitic shield generator sputtered and died, leaving only the forest sounds, wind, water, distant birdsong. The final layer of his invincibility shed. Trell froze, comprehension dawning, laced with horror. You defy Imperial command? You surrender? To this? Her hand hovered near her sidearm, a gesture of futile threat against his bulk. Forlag finally turned his head, the movement ponderous. He looked not at Trell's fury, but through it, towards the untouched depths of the forest, the towering mountains hazy in the distance. Not surrender, he corrected, the word unfamiliar on his synthesizer. Understanding. He took a single, earth-trembling step, not towards the troopers or Trell, but away, towards the primal green heart of the wilderness. Then another. A silent, irrevocable declaration. Trell's hand fell. Stop him! She ordered the troopers, her voice cracking. Weapons snapped up, targeting lasers painting red dots on Forlag's retreating backplate. But no one fired. The sheer, impossible aura of his quiet departure, the discarded might, the shattered legend walking away, held them paralyzed. Trell watched the Colossus vanish into the trees, a monument to imperial power becoming one with the shadows he had failed to conquer. Her final gesture was not command, but stunned, defeated resignation. Weeks bled into months. Forlag wandered the vastness, a ghost of plasteel and fading ambition. He shed non-essential armor plates, leaving a trail of imperial gray amidst the ferns and moss, pauldrons like discarded boulders, greaves half buried in stream banks. The crushing weight lessened, physically and spiritually. He observed nature's relentless reclamation, ferns unfurling through scorched earth, saplings pushing through rubble, life persisting, adapting, growing despite his violence. The constant drumbeat of rage was replaced by the rhythm of rain, wind, and his own heavy tread. He found a secluded valley untouched by imperial scanners or conflict. A cluster of simple dwellings nestled near a clear river, humans. Farmers tending terraced plots, artisans shaping wood and stone, elders sharing quiet stories. Their terror at his sudden, massive presence was palpable. They scattered, hid, watched with wide, fearful eyes from behind shutters. Forlag did the unthinkable. He approached the largest boulder blocking a newly tilled field. Without a word, without aggression, he bent his massive cybernetic legs, braced, and lifted. Muscles and servos whined, earth crumbled, and the multi-ton stone shifted, then rolled aside with a ground-shaking thud. He moved to the riverbank where erosion threatened a plot. Using his sheer mass and strength, He redirected a small flow, creating a protective berm of earth and stone. Simple act. Useful acts. No plasma, no blades, just applied strength creating, not destroying. Slowly, cautiously, the villagers emerged. An elder, face lined like weathered bark, offered a bowl of water. Forelag, after a moment's hesitation, accepted, drinking through a helmet port. Communication was gestures, fragmented words learned from salvaged, low-powered datapads he'd found abandoned. He learned their names. They learned he was not Forelag the Unbroken here, just Forelag. He observed their patient cultivation, the artisans' focus on grain, not fracture, the quiet strength in their resilience. He studied ancient texts accessed on the pads, Zen koans speaking of stillness, Taoist principles of flow, Bushido's deeper tenets of honor beyond battle, fragments of Ninpo philosophy about winning through evasion and inner peace. He saw Kage's calm focus reflected in the farmer's watchful eye on seedlings, the weaver's rhythmic patience. The hollowness within him filled, not with fury, but with a profound, aching peace and a crushing regret for oceans of spilled blood. True strength resided here, in endurance, harmony, and creation. Years flowed like the valley river. News of Forelag's defection became a galaxy-spanning legend, a crack in imperial propaganda. He faced the ninja and never fought again. The phrase spread, a cautionary tale whispered in barracks, a cryptic puzzle debated in academies, a quiet spark questioning the Empire's doctrine of absolute force. Morale faltered where his name was mentioned. In the valley, Forelag was a quiet giant. Stripped of most armor, his cybernetic frame covered in simple, sturdy cloth, he moved with deliberate slowness. He tended a vast Zen garden he had sculpted from a rocky slope, raking gravel into flowing patterns around carefully placed, weathered stones. He used a salvaged, low-powered plasma cutter with the delicacy of a calligrapher's brush, shaping boulders into serene forms for the village square. He was their silent guardian, their gentle mover of mountains. One crisp morning, a young child, eyes bright with curiosity untainted by old fears, approached him as he smoothed the gravel around a central stone. "Forelag?" the child asked, pointing at the intricate patterns. "My grandmama says you were the strongest warrior? Stronger than the starships?" Forelag paused, the rake hovering. He looked down at his hands that had crushed starship hulls and incinerated legions, now calloused with earthwork, stained with soil. He picked up a smooth, water-worn stone from the riverbed, its surface cool and comforting. He offered it to the child. "I thought I was, little one," he said, his voice a soft rumble like distant thunder, devoid of malice. He looked towards the mist-shrouded peaks where shadows danced. "Until I learned strength, is not what I believed." He gently placed the stone in the child's small palm. "True strength is knowing when not to fight. And what is worth growing," he gestured towards the thriving fields, the peaceful village, the patterns in the sand, instead of breaking. The child stared at the valley breathed in the golden haze of late afternoon. Forelag knelt by the riverbank, his massive hands surprisingly deft as they pressed damp earth around the roots of a young willow sapling. The rhythmic scrape of his gardening trowel blended with distant laughter from the village, children chasing geese, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, life unfolding in simple, sturdy patterns. The piece was a tangible thing, worn smooth like the river stones he sometimes carried in his pocket. Yet, beneath the cybernetic shell, a subtle tension hummed, an old instinct whispering of approaching thunder. A vibration, faint but distinct, resonated through the packed earth beneath his knees. Not an earthquake. A harmonic tremor, artificial, precise. Imperial sensor sweep. Low altitude. Scouts. The realization struck cold and clean, slicing through the pastoral calm. His internal chronometer, a relic he hadn't silenced, flickered 17 years, 4 months, 2 days. They hadn't forgotten. Or perhaps they'd just finally looked. He didn't stand. Didn't react outwardly. He finished patting the earth, his movements deliberate, unhurried. Inside, the ghosts stirred the roar of plasma, the crunch of armor, the addictive surge of rage. They violate the peace. They threaten what you built. The old forelag snarled, demanding retribution, demanding the thunder of his fists. He closed his eyes, not in fear, but in focus. He sought the quiet center Kage's silent lesson had carved within him, the place where the river's flow met the mountain's stillness. Strength is knowing when not to fight. Opening his eyes, he saw Kaido, the blacksmith's son, now a lanky teenager, watching him from the path, a basket of river reeds forgotten at his feet. There was no fear in Kaido's eyes, only a question. Forelag gave the slightest shake of his head, a gesture of reassurance learned over years. He rose, a mountain unfolding, and walked not towards the village, but towards the high eastern ridge overlooking the valley. His pace was measured, purposeful, a guardian assessing a storm front. From the ridge, the valley sprawled below, bathed in amber light, a perfect bowl of serenity. Then he saw them, two sleek, angular imperial skimmers, like obsidian shards, gliding silently just below the cloud cover, hugging the contours of the distant peaks. Their sensor pods pulsed with faint blue light, methodically combing the terrain. Hunting him, the urge to roar a challenge, to draw their fire away, was a physical ache in his reinforced bones. He flexed his hands, imagining the satisfying crush of their cockpits. Instead, he sank down onto a weathered boulder, becoming part of the landscape. He recalled a fragment of an Earth text. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. He had scoffed at it once. Now it was his shield. He watched the skimmers, tracking their patterns, their distance. They were cautious, probing. They hadn't pinpointed the valley yet, but they were close. Too close. A whisper of movement, not wind, stirred the tall grass beside him. He didn't turn. He knew the scent of ozone and damp earth, the profound stillness that announced the shadow. Kage stood there, as if materialized from the mountain mist, gazing at the distant skimmers. No words passed between them. None were needed. The threat was evident. Forelag's stillness was his answer. Kage's presence was an anchor, a silent affirmation of the path chosen. The lead skimmer banked sharply, its sensors flaring brighter, directed towards a secondary valley where Forelag had deliberately left traces years ago, discarded, non-essential armor plates near an old landslide. A decoy. The skimmer descended, vanishing below the tree line, its partner hovering watchfully. Minutes stretched, thick with tension. Forelag remained motionless, a statue carved from resolve. The rage was there, banked but potent, a furnace he kept carefully contained. Let them find the ghosts. Let them find the remnants of the Unbroken. He is not there. The second skimmer suddenly jerked upwards, climbing rapidly. A brief, distorted burst of comms chatter crackled faintly on an old Imperial frequency. Forelag's internal receptors still passively scanned. Negative contact, debris field confirmed. Old tech, no life signs. Proceeding to grid, the lead skimmer reappeared, climbing to join its partner. Together, they pivoted, engines flaring briefly, and arrowed away to the north, continuing their fruitless search elsewhere. The artificial thunder faded, replaced by the wind sighing through the pines. The valley remained untouched, peaceful. Forelag let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, a slow, controlled exhalation. He looked at Kage. The ninja's dark eyes met his, holding for a moment that stretched into an eternity. There was no praise, no judgment. Only a profound depth of understanding, a recognition of the monumental battle just fought and won in absolute stillness. Then, like smoke on the wind, Kage was gone, leaving only the scent of pine needles. Forelag stood, his gaze sweeping the valley below, the smoke rising from chimneys, the gleam of the river, the tiny figures moving with unhurried purpose. The cost of his old life was written in the blood of billions. The cost of this peace was eternal vigilance, the constant mastery of the storm within. The skimmers would return, or others like them. The Empire's shadow was long. He descended the ridge, not as a conqueror, but as a gardener returning to his work. He stopped by the young willow, its leaves trembling slightly in the breeze. He touched a leaf, feeling its delicate life. True strength wasn't the absence of conflict, but the choice to protect the fragile, growing things, even when the old fury screamed for release. The path of the unbroken silence was not an end, but a continuous, deliberate act of creation, a defiance etched not in destruction, but in the quiet, enduring patterns of peace. He picked up his trowel, the cool metal a familiar weight, and returned to tending the earth, the silent guardian watching the horizon, ready for the next tremor, ready to choose stillness again. The war within was the only one left, and he was determined to win it, one quiet breath at a time.